As was mentioned earlier, everything that we say today, every song that we sing, everything is in the context of driving. Everything is in the context of how we live our lives when we don't really think we're living our lives, when it's that time in between living our lives, you know, getting from one place to another, when we're still living, but we forget. At least I do. So with that in mind, I share with you these words by Kenneth Patton, a Universalist minister from about 30 years ago. We arrive out of many singular rooms, walking, driving over the branching streets. We come to be assured that brothers and sisters surround us to restore their image in our eyes. We enlarge our voices in common speaking and singing. We try again that solitude found in the midst of those who with us seek their hidden reckonings. Our eyes reclaim the remembered faces. Their voices stir that surrounding air. The warmth of their hands assure us, and the gladness of our spoken names. This is the reason of cities, of homes, of assemblies in the houses of worship. It is good to be together with one another. Let us just take a moment and pause and give ourselves time to be in this space, to fully come present into this moment of being together. Come, let us worship together.
Hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Karen Lightsey and I'm your office administrator. And it's been... And it's been 143 days since my last car accident. I come by my bad driving habits honestly. As a student driver, I learned from my parents to speed and yell at anyone on the road who offended me. And my main teacher, my oldest sister's husband, loved to show off his ability to control the steering wheel with only one knee. Craving the freedom from a contentious household that a driver's license could offer, I took my test the second I turned 16. It was here in the Springs in October of 1995, and the roads were dusted with the barest hint of snow. I'll never forget the look of disdain on the examiner's face when she clicked the passenger seatbelt of my mom's 1991 white Chevy Lumina in place and discovered that the top part of the belt, damaged in an accident and never repaired, was incapable of retracting. I didn't get a perfect score on that test, but I did pass, and the seatbelt and failing to slow down in a school zone were the only points counted against me. In the last 20 years, driving has afforded me many opportunities for good and ill. There's been money handed out the window, music enjoyed, world news caught up on, batteries jumped, people pushed out of trouble in the snow and ice, and relationships strengthened. But there's also been obscenities, rude hand gestures, honking, speeding tickets, frightened passengers, and more than one totaled car. After my most recent accident, I had an illuminating conversation with Reverend Dana Lightsey, who I since like to think of as my driving sponsor. Prompted by the thoughts she shared, I taped the rainbow bookmark of the 7 principles to my car's dashboard. Each day after that, before starting up the car, I'd read one of the principles and repeat it out loud over and over to myself on the way to my destination, until I had them all memorized. This practice has made driving a time of mindful meditation, where I can practice living the 7 principles. The bookmark is a constant reminder of the kind of driver I want to be. One full of kindness, awareness, and patience. I look forward to hearing the lessons from the road that Reverend Dana will share with us all today, and I light this chalice for standing on the side of love while sitting behind the wheel. I have to stop shaking long enough to get up late. Nope.
Candles easier.
Yeah.
Our reading today, the author is a 2nd century Roman historian named Eusebius. He was also a scholar. Obviously, he wasn't writing about driving cars. This is surprisingly apt for our topic today. Lynn, if you'll advance that, it should be on the, yes, on the screen.
Now, you don't have to do this as a responsive reading. It's just going to be the two of us. I mean, join in if you feel like it, but we thought you might want to see the words also.
May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal and abides.
May I wish for every person's happiness and envy none.
May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me.
May I, to the extent of my power, give needful help to all who are in want.
May I never fail a friend.
May I respect myself.
May I always keep tame that which rages within me.
May I accustom myself to be gentle and never be angry with others because of circumstances.
May I know good people and follow in their footsteps.
Or in their tracks. I've spent a lot of time on the road. I've been commuting for a few decades, actually. It's kind of nice to have just moved here. It took me 9 minutes to get to work this morning. I almost drove home and practiced it again. Of course, I commuted from Golden to here last year, but I've been commuting most of my professional life. My first teaching job was in Thornton, the northern part of Denver metro area, if you're not familiar with it. And I lived in Greeley. So it was exactly, back then, a 48-minute drive every day, back in the late 80s and 90s. There were two ways to go, you see. I could either take the interstate, or I could take Highway 85, which goes through many small towns along the way. Thinking that it was faster and more efficient, I decided to take the interstate for most of my first year. Well, it didn't take long before I felt myself falling into the trap of wanting to get ahead of yet the next car that was in front of me. Amazing how it just didn't occur to me that there's always going to be another car in front of me. I would dodge into the slow lane, hoping to get around the guy who was in my way, just to get trapped behind someone else even slower, and in my mind, fall further behind in some imaginary race that was happening only in my head. Not to mention that I was driving around 75 miles an hour, which is slow these days, but the speed limit back then was 65 on the interstate. So no matter how fast I went, there was always someone else going faster, and so many others that were in my way. After a number of close calls and witnessing numerous accidents, it finally began to dawn on me that for some reason, I thought I was in a race, but I wasn't. And if I didn't cool it, I very well might not live to my second year of teaching. So I said goodbye to the interstate and began to take Highway 85. This is a much slower road with stoplights and slower speed limits in every little town. It took a while and a few speeding tickets for me to calm down and chill out behind the wheel. And eventually, it mellowed into a daily routine, at least most of the time, although I've got stories. I was used to the occasional farmer pulling out in front of me on a tractor, and the really crazy drivers, like maybe I had been, seemed to stay over on the interstate most of the time. Nowadays, driving on the interstate means trying to stay out of people's way who want to go 90 miles an hour or faster. And I think to myself, what's their problem? And why do they feel entitled to ride on my bumper and maybe flash their lights or give me dirty looks and gestures? Don't they see that I'm passing cars? I may not be going as fast as they want, but day after day, I see how their aggressive actions pay off. Ride someone's bumper close enough, and most of the time it scares them into either speeding up or getting out of the way. For a while, years ago, I thought I would try to teach these people a lesson. Such confessions. So every time someone began riding my bumper, I would begin slowing down ever so slightly. Who's the aggressive one now? Perhaps passive-aggressive, I think. Well, I learned how dangerous that could be when a berserk young kid tried to slam into me, literally slam into me, and drove me off the road, and I had to take the ditch. So I don't do that anymore, even though every now and then I'm slightly tempted. Nope, I just give them what they want, as if they were holding a deadly weapon to my head. Oh yeah, they are. With all the decades of commuting, rather long distances, I've become fascinated with driving habits and patterns. I love to analyze where slowdowns occur in rush hour traffic and plan which lane to be in at what particular moment. Yeah, I know I'm a bit weird, but it keeps me entertained. And through the years, I have come to realize that I consider driving to be an activity that not only gets me to different places that I need to go, but it is time when I am actually living my life. I never really thought that I was living my life while I was driving. Driving was just one of those things that I did in order to get to the places where I lived my life. Huh, isn't that interesting? And unconsciously, I seemed to think that I was not as bound to live the same beliefs and ethics during these times as I did the rest of my life. What's that about? Is this because I, and everyone else on the road, is anonymous when we are driving? In fact, it is all too easy to lose track of the fact that each car has real human beings who are precious and have precious lives, and are probably not the jerks and the idiots and the losers and the that we might think that they are. And yet, on the other hand, I have endlessly marveled at the fact that so few accidents happen. Now that might seem a little crazy to say, because there are too many accidents for sure, and too many people that are injured and even killed. But how many close calls have each and every one of us had? Day in and day out, sometimes perhaps our own fault, sometimes perhaps others. And yet it's like we have a bubble around us. We don't want to crash into each other, and so we are constantly looking out for each other. And most people on the road, not all, of course, most are helping us, are making room, are accommodating, are getting out of the way, are speeding up, and we are doing the same for them. It's like this beautiful dance. most of the time. Well, maybe 60% of the time. It is a fascinating way to observe humanity. We see the best and the worst of humanity, and probably the best and worst of ourselves too. And just like the rest of our lives, when we expect to see, what we expect to see is what we tend to experience. And what we notice, and is the first thing that is reinforced when we notice it. So, for instance, when we expect to see bad drivers, that's what we see. That's what we experience. And that gets us all riled up because, by George, we just knew that was going to be the way it is. And isn't that the way life is, too? And if we expect to see all those people who are really helping us along the way, making room, helping us out, then that's what we notice, and that's what we expect in life. And that's what we create for ourselves. So I've learned to ask myself, what is a better way to live my life out there on the road? How do I live my faith out there on the road? How do I resist going along with the least common denominator and going faster and faster and faster, being crazier and riding somebody else's bumper because someone else riding mine? How do I set a better example? What promises do I make to all of those anonymous people in this sea of humanity and metal? Is anything on my agenda worth putting my life and all of these people's lives at risk? Anything? Let us take a time of silence, just a little break to ponder these questions. Years ago, I read a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Peace is Every Step. And in that book, he has a meditation about driving. He says, in Vietnam 40 years ago, I was the first monk to ride a bicycle. At that time, it was not considered a very monkish thing to do, but monks ride bicycles and motorcycles and even drive cars now. We have to keep our meditation practices up to date and respond to the real situations in the world. So I have written a simple verse that you can recite before starting your car. I hope you find it helpful. All right, everybody. Imagine yourself. Before starting the car, I know where I am going. If the car and I are one. If the car goes fast, I go fast. Once again. Before starting the car, I know where I am going. The car and I are one. If the car goes fast, I go fast. The car and I are one, he continues to say. We have the impression that we are the boss, and the car is only an instrument. But that is not true. When we use an instrument or a machine, we change. A violinist with his violin becomes very beautiful. A man with a gun becomes very dangerous. When we use a car, we are ourselves and the car together. Driving is a daily task in this society, and I'm not suggesting you stop driving, just that you do it more consciously. While we are driving, we are only thinking about arriving. Therefore, every time we see a red light, we are not very happy. The red light is a kind of enemy that prevents us from attaining our goal. But we can also see the red light as a bell of mindfulness, reminding us to return to this present moment. The next time you see a red light, please smile at it and go back to your breathing. Let me repeat that. The next time you see a red light, please smile at it and go back to your breathing. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. It is easy to transform a feeling of irritation into a pleasant feeling. Although it is the same red light, it becomes different. It becomes a friend, helping us remember that it is only in this present moment that we can live our lives. So what if we follow Thich Nhat Hanh's advice and turn this whole driving paradigm on its head? What if every time we step into our cars, we begin a spiritual practice, or we see driving as a spiritual practice? Now, you might not consider it a spiritual practice, but whatever you do to help you become a better person, calmer, more centered, more whole, then that is a spiritual practice. When we lose ourselves in mindless upset and even rage when we are driving, or at any other times in our lives, we have lost track of that which matters most, our deepest values, our sense of true self, and a healthy perspective for being in the world. When we end up spending crazy amounts of time and energy ruminating and ranting, anybody relate to this? I sure do. Over something that happened miles ago and can't be changed, what do we lose? Following Thich Nhat Hanh's advice and returning to the breath, returning to the present moment, calming down, one can think more clearly, guided by higher reasoning rather than angry instinct. Ask yourself this: am I willing to let this person steal away my calm, good mood? How much power over my life am I willing to give to this total stranger who I will never see again? That changes it, doesn't it? When I breathe in peace. When I breathe in, you have to do that part. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. As members of this church, we have agreed, maybe you forgot this, it is an agreement, our covenant, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Not just the one who lets you in when you have to change lanes, but also perhaps, and maybe more especially, the ones who won't let you in, or the ones who do cut you off, or the ones who do ride your bumper, or make rude gestures because you are only going 8 miles an hour over the speed limit in the fast lane. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. I can tell you right now, this is a challenging spiritual practice. At least it is for me. It is an insult to my ego to say a wish and a blessing for someone who just cut me off. But maybe our egos need a bit of bruising and battering from time to time to remind us of our own humility and our own humanity. I humbly remind myself of times that I too have perhaps cut other people off. And I vow to be a better driver. And then I invite myself to let go of any anger I have and wish the other person well. Not begrudgingly, but genuinely. For he or she is too a part of our human family and a precious part of the interconnected web of all existence, of which we are a part. We all have unconscious thoughts and feelings that seemingly come out of nowhere, but are really an invitation to us to get to know ourselves better. This is both true in and there is no better time. The next time, as Thich Nhat Hanh tells us, you see a red light, please smile at it, even if those red lights are the lights of the car in front of you. It is easy to transform a feeling of irritation into pleasant feeling. Thich Nhat Hanh says, breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Although it is the same red light, it becomes different. It becomes a friend, helping us to remember that it is only in the present moment that we can live our lives. There's something strange and beautiful about traffic. Perhaps we only notice it at night when we can see the form of this endless row of taillights coming one way and headlights coming the other. But it is a sublime river of humanity. The baby, the old man, the teenage girl, the mom. Each of them has the spark of divine life within them. The same spark that you and I have. It does have a certain beauty in its interconnected nature. When it's all working, we have found the elegance of working together in a dance of cooperation for the communal goal of getting where we are trying to be. And each person in the endless river of cars gives us another opportunity to practice the greatest spiritual teaching that there is: kindness. May it be so. Amen. I invite you now to rise in body and spirit, and for our hymn leaders to come join me in singing number 134, Our World is One World, even when we're driving.